My wife secretly took my old dog to a harsh trainer. She said, "It's your problem." "I'm just fixing his bad habits." I replied, "You're right. It's my job to remove bad influences." I sent the security camera footage of her being cruel to the dog to her family and filed for divorce. To truly understand why I did what I did, you have to understand Max. He wasn't a perfect fluffy puppy anymore. Max is a 12-year-old Labrador. He's deaf in one ear, moves slow, and yes, he sheds a ridiculous amount of fur. But Max wasn't just a dog, he was family. He was the one piece of emotional stability I always clung to. I'm Leo, a software engineer in Seattle, and Max was my constant when everything else felt chaotic. Then I met Maya. She was 38, and everything about her was sharp. Her style, her career, her demand for absolute perfection. She was utterly obsessed with appearances. Initially, she tolerated Max, but as he grew older, as his muzzle turned gray and he started needing more naps, her tolerance curdled into active resentment. Max no longer fit her image. He didn't look good in her curated social media posts. She started seeing his graying face and his slow gait as a flaw in our otherwise perfect home. "Leo, he's a liability," she would tell me, staring pointedly at the dog hair on the sofa. "He trips guests. He smells. He's developing bad habits." Her solution was always rooted in control and contempt. She tried to push him out of the main rooms. She mocked my patience when I had to help him up the stairs after a long walk. I kept telling myself it was just stress. I reminded her that Max was old, that he was loyal, and that he deserved respect. She'd just shrug and say, "That's your problem, Leo. I'm just telling you what everyone else sees." That was the crucial difference between us. I saw a life built on years of unconditional loyalty. She saw a problem to be outsourced or eliminated. She hated the shedding. She hated the slowness. But above all, she hated the fact that Max represented my loyalty to something old and imperfect. It was a loyalty she felt should only be reserved for her. She viewed my devotion to the aging dog as a direct challenge to her control. She had to assert dominance over the one thing in our home that she knew I would never abandon. That's why she made the decision to take him to the harsh trainer in secret. The decision to take Max to a harsh trainer wasn't something Maya announced. It began with small, precise acts of cruelty aimed at breaking his spirit. After our argument, Max started acting strange. He was my loyal, goofy Labrador, but suddenly he was lethargic, anxious, and he started visibly flinching whenever Maya walked quickly past him. He began hiding under the dining table, a spot he hadn't used since he was a puppy. I noticed the shift immediately. He stopped meeting me at the door with his usual enthusiastic, full-body wag. Instead, he would peer out nervously from the hallway, waiting to see who else was in the room. I confronted Maya about the change. She was instantly defensive, turning my observation into an indictment of my training skills. "It's your fault, Leo," she snapped. "You're too soft. You've taught him bad habits, and now he's just acting out." She started using sharp, disciplinary words I'd never heard her use. She'd deliberately try to force Max to obey commands that his aging body couldn't manage quickly. If he was slow, she'd sigh loudly and mutter, "See?" Useless. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, but I was still trying to rationalize it as stress. I am a software engineer. I look for data to solve a problem. I needed proof that her cruelty wasn't just verbal. The first physical evidence came 2 weeks after her ultimatum. I was brushing Max, running the soft bristles over his thick fur, when I felt it. 2 small, distinct bruises on his flanks. They were faint, almost hidden, but they were there. I carefully lifted the fur, feeling the tenderness of the area. This wasn't a fall. This was inflicted pain. When I asked Maya about the bruises, she didn't even look up from her laptop. "I don't know, maybe he fell down the stairs." "He's old, Leo. Stop treating him like a fragile artifact." I knew she was lying. I didn't argue further. I immediately initiated the search for the truth. I started with the financial records. I checked our joint checking account for any unusual, large withdrawals, the type that wouldn't show up on a shared calendar. I found a $1,500 transfer made 3 days prior to a company I didn't recognize. The Spartan Dog Academy. A quick search of Spartan Dog Academy Portland confirmed my worst fears. It was a remote training facility known locally for using outdated, harsh disciplinary methods, specializing in breaking bad habits in older dogs. I realized the monstrous scope of her actions. She had outsourced the punishment of my loyal, aging companion because she disliked his mere presence. The contempt wasn't just aimed at my soft heart, it was aimed at his fragile body. That night, I went straight to my computer. I wasn't looking for divorce papers yet. I was pulling up the archive for my home security system. I had strategically placed high-definition cameras in the main living areas years ago, mainly for package theft, but they were about to serve a far darker purpose. I knew the cameras would have recorded Max's behavior and the precise moments Maya brought him in and out of the house. I began the meticulous, painful process of reviewing the footage, searching for the irrefutable evidence of her cruelty. The $1,500 bill for the aggressive obedience training was the cold data point I needed. It confirmed my suspicion of the bruises, but it didn't prepare me for the visual truth. I went straight to my computer and accessed the archive of our home security system. The cameras were high definition, meant primarily to deter package thieves. Now they were going to serve a much darker purpose. I began the meticulous, agonizing process of reviewing the footage from the last week, focusing on the times Maya was alone with Max. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I was searching for confirmation of cruelty, and I found it. The first clip I found showed Maya trying to force Max into his crate. Max, old and slightly arthritic, was slow to comply. I watched as Maya became visibly frustrated, her words turning sharp and cruel. Then came the physical evidence. In one devastating clip, I saw her, not hitting, which would have been easier to process, but shoving Max violently off the sofa where he was not allowed to sit. He landed heavily on the hardwood floor, letting out a small, pained yelp. She didn't apologize. She didn't check on him. She just glared, grabbed his leash, and dragged him toward the door for his training session. The camera audio, which was unexpectedly clear, captured her whispering, "This is your fault, Max. If you weren't so useless, I wouldn't have to send you away." This wasn't neglect. This wasn't a sudden mistake. This was calculated malice aimed at an aging, defenseless animal. I spent the next 2 hours securing the evidence. I clipped and downloaded every incriminating moment, creating a pristine, time-stamped video file. I locked the file on an encrypted drive and emailed a copy to a trusted off-site server. My profession had trained me to be calm in a crisis, but watching the video shattered that composure. My loyal, gentle dog, reduced to cowering in fear in his own home. I realized I couldn't just file for divorce. Divorce was too clean, too clinical for this level of moral violation. I needed her to face a consequence that addressed the cruelty she had shown. I immediately called my best friend Alex, who works as a paralegal for a local firm. I didn't explain the details, I just said I needed to file a divorce petition, a restraining order, and I needed contact information for every member of Maya's immediate family. Alex, sensing the cold finality in my voice, only asked one question. "Did you find proof?" "Yes," I replied. "And it's visual." The plan was clear. I would not just tell her family about the abuse. I would show them. I would use her own actions, recorded in high definition, as the ultimate, unforgivable truth. Maya walked in around 6 p.m., dropping her work bag with a sigh and heading straight for the kitchen. She didn't see the laptop open in the study, and she didn't see the silent verdict that had been reached in her absence. She was focused on dinner. "The neighbors complained about Max again," she lied, pulling a container of takeout from the fridge. "He's acting out. He needs to go back to that trainer, but we need to pay the remaining balance." I walked into the kitchen, the memory of the footage, her shoving him off the sofa, burning clear in my mind. "He doesn't need more training, Maya," I said. He needs medical attention. She froze, turning slowly. What are you talking about? I told you, he just fell. He didn't fall, I countered. I took a printed photo of the invoice from the table, the one for the Spartan Dog Academy, and placed it on the counter. I know about the harsh trainer. I know about the bruises. And I know you just lied to me. She cycled through confusion, anger, and immediate denial. You went through my things? You're completely paranoid, Leo. I did it for him. I was fixing his bad habits that you ignored. Bad habits? I asked. You mean habits like loyalty and age? He's 12, Maya. You paid someone to inflict pain on an aging, defenseless animal. She tried the gaslighting tactic one last time, her voice rising. You're making this up. You're too soft. You're letting your emotions run your life. This is your problem, Leo. I'm just fixing his bad habits. I let her words hang in the air. That was the final, unforgivable quote I needed. You're right, I said, repeating her words with terrifying calm. It's my problem, and it's my job to remove bad influences. I immediately moved to the execution phase. I finalized the video file, creating a tight 2-minute montage showing Max's fear and the clear moments of her abuse, child neglect captured by the cameras. I also attached the $1,500 training invoice and the vet report documenting Max's unexpected anxiety. The most crucial step was selecting the target audience. I didn't send the video to her friends. I sent it to the core of her conscience. I emailed the package to her mother, her sister, and her brother, the people who viewed themselves as having the highest moral ground. The email subject line was chillingly simple: the truth about Max. I didn't add accusations. The video spoke for itself. I finished the task by completing the final divorce petition with my lawyer, securing a temporary restraining order based on the animal abuse documentation. The physical distance was established, and the evidence was armed. I took the car keys, my wallet, Max's leash, and walked out the door for the last time. I left behind a short, final note on the kitchen counter next to her phone. The note was concise. The abuse stops now. See your email. I drove Max straight to my sister's house, leaving the apartment and the toxic atmosphere behind. Max, exhausted but safe, immediately curled up by the fireplace, finally at peace. I called my lawyer, confirmed the restraining order, and sent a final email authorizing the immediate serving of the divorce papers. The waiting was the hardest part. I knew the moment of detonation would be when Maya checked her email and saw the file I sent to her family. The first call came 3 hours after I left. It wasn't Maya, it was her older brother Ryan, whose voice was tight with disbelief. Leo, what in God's name did you send Mom? The truth about Max, I replied, my voice calm, clinical. He was silent for a long moment. I saw the video, Leo. What she did, she told us the dog just ran away. She lied, I said. And now you know the cost of her perfectionism? The moment Ryan hung up, Maya's direct call came through. Her voice was not hysterical. It was a low, terrifying growl of pure, trapped fury. You are a dead man, Leo. You blackmailed my family. I didn't blackmail anyone, Maya. I provided evidence of a crime. The moment you put your hands on Max, this stopped being a marriage. It became a police matter. She screamed, cycling through every toxic defense she had ever used. You're making this up. Max is a problem dog. I was fixing his bad habits that you were too soft to handle. You're too emotionally sensitive. You're ruining my reputation because you can't handle a simple breakup. I let her rage fill the line, listening until her voice cracked with despair. Then I cut in, my voice low and final, echoing the words she had used against me. You're right, Maya. It is my job to fix bad habits. I am removing the source of the rot in my life. I am removing the bad influence. You called me soft, so I'm showing you exactly how hard I can be when the one thing I love is threatened. She tried to bargain, her voice becoming weak and tearful. Leo, please. I'll apologize. I'll bring him home. We can work this out. We can still save the wedding. The wedding is off, I stated. The papers were served 20 minutes ago. And you can't bring Max home because you are currently named on a temporary restraining order. The silence that followed was total, heavy, and absolute. It was the silence of a life being severed completely. I delivered the final, devastating truth using the exact words she had thrown at me. You said it's your problem. I'm just fixing his bad habits. I replied, you're right. It's my job to remove bad influences. And I just removed the worst one. I hung up, placing the phone on the table. The external noise of her chaos was finally completely cut off. The battle wasn't just won. The ethical violation had been exposed to the only people whose judgment truly mattered to her. I hung up the phone on Maya and placed it on the kitchen counter at my sister's house. The external sound of her rage was cut off, but I knew the emotional explosion had only just begun. My final weapon wasn't the divorce paper. It was the video file sitting in the inboxes of her mother, her sister, and her brother. I sat at the table with Max, who was finally asleep, curled up and safe. The hours that followed were a waiting game, one where I knew the silence would be broken by their judgment. The first call came from Maya's sister, Clara, whom I had always respected. I answered. She didn't scream at me. Her voice was a strained, horrified whisper. Leo, I saw the video. What did you send us? The truth about what she was doing to Max, I replied. You have to understand. Mom is in shock. She's asking how much of this is real. It's all real, I confirmed. Every painful second of her forcing him, of her shoving him. That's why I left. Clara didn't defend her sister. She just said, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry, Leo, about everything. The moral compass of her family was pointing directly at Maya's cruelty. Her family valued image and respectability above all else. And animal cruelty was an unforgivable ethical stain. Then came the call from Maya's mother. She didn't use her usual tone of protective anger. Her voice was raw, broken, and filled with deep, burning shame. Leo, I saw the clip of her pushing Max. She told us he was just being stubborn. She told us he fell. We told her this was not a matter of money, but of morality. I am so ashamed, Leo. We had no idea. I explained that the divorce papers were filed and a restraining order was secured to keep Maya away from Max. I explained that I didn't want their money or their assets. I just wanted the cruelty to stop. The judgment was swift and absolute. Maya's entire family, confronted with visual proof of her moral failure, immediately turned against her. She was no longer the brilliant, ambitious daughter. She was the ethical liability. I heard later that her mother gave her an ultimatum. Either check into intensive therapy immediately or be cut off from the family entirely. They refused to give her money for a lawyer to fight the restraining order. The final blow to Maya's self-image wasn't the divorce. It was the realization that the people whose approval she craved most saw the video and chose the aging dog over her. She had spent years optimizing her image, only to have the ultimate proof of her internal rot delivered by a small, hidden camera. I looked down at Max, his old head resting heavily on my knee. I had won the war, not through financial strategy, but by making her face the single, unforgivable truth of her own character. 6 months passed. The initial chaos of the divorce faded, replaced by the profound quiet of a life finally free from conflict. The most important recovery wasn't mine, it was Max's. The anxiety he carried, the constant flinching, the hiding under the table, began to vanish. He slowly reclaimed his goofy, full-body wag and his confident stride. He was sleeping soundly, no longer anticipating a sudden, harsh correction. My sister, who had helped me through the initial trauma, called it an emotional decontamination. We had successfully removed the source of the poison. Maya, meanwhile, experienced the full force of the ethical consequences. The judgment she faced wasn't from a courtroom, it was from her own family. They were devastated by the video evidence of her cruelty. Her mother, who once used to call me too soft, called me once to apologize. her voice filled with shame. She didn't apologize for Maya. She apologized for being blind to her daughter's character flaws for so long. They refused to take Maya back into their home. The family that valued external image and moral high ground saw the animal abuse and made an unforgiving choice. She was left completely isolated, living with friends and burning through favors. Her career as a project manager was ruined. The video evidence of her volatile temper and ethical failure was shown during a critical review at her company. She lost her job and her social standing in one clean severance. I eventually moved into a new apartment with a small fenced yard perfect for Max. I poured my energy into my work, using the discipline I had learned in the military reserve to build a stable life. The constant need to watch my back, to analyze every word for contempt, was gone. I looked at Max, now peacefully asleep in a sunbeam, his old gray muzzle resting on his paws. He was the single most important piece of evidence I carried into my new life. He was proof that loyalty must be rewarded and that cruelty is an unforgivable debt. Maya once thought that inflicting suffering was a valid tool for optimization. She thought her cruelty would break my will. She learned that the moral line, once crossed, ensures that the system you were trying to control will ultimately turn against you. I often thought about the finality of my decision. I didn't seek revenge or demand money. I simply evacuated the building and used the moral truth to ensure she could never inflict that kind of pain again.